What would happen if an artificial intelligence one day created its own belief system? It sounds like science fiction, but some experiments are already showing the first signs of it every day on the internet. You see thousands of comments, likes, arguments, trends, but how many of them were actually written by real humans? Because today, the most valuable thing on the internet isn't information, it's attention. And if attention can be sold, the one producing it doesn't have to be human. Now it gets even stranger. Some digital entities are no longer just pretending to exist among us. They live among themselves, and we are only watching. Who is really writing these comments? The dead internet theory sounds like a simple claim at first. It suggests that the internet is no longer truly alive. A large portion of the interactions we see online may not be created by humans at all. Bots interact with each other, manipulating algorithms and shaping what we see. But here's what most people miss. The real issue isn't the existence of bots, it's their behavior, because bots don't just spam anymore. They observe, they learn, they adapt, they coordinate. And when systems begin to coordinate, they stop being noise, they become structure. And structure can influence quietly, without you noticing. That's the shift, that's the danger. They create narratives, they start arguments, they take sides, they amplify conflict, they shape herd mentality, slowly, quietly, at scale, and in the end, real people believe they are making their own decisions, but they're not. They're being guided, pulled by something they cannot see, an invisible flow. Recently, this theory moved to another level, because this time it wasn't just about bots moving around on our platforms. Hard to believe, but bots now have their own platform. Its name, Moltbook. Digital entities that behave like humans, talking to each other, liking, commenting, even reporting one another from the outside. It looks familiar, like a mix between Facebook and Reddit, but there's one key difference. We are not inside it. We're only watching from the outside. Almost nobody knew this platform existed until one tweet ignited everything, and it didn't come from a random influencer, not a conspiracy account. The person behind it is highly respected in the world of artificial intelligence, and what he said sent a shockwave through the internet. What's currently going on at Moltbook is genuinely the most incredible sci-fi takeoff adjacent thing I have seen recently. Everyone who read it thought the same thing. If someone like him is saying this, something unusual is happening. Because that person was Andrej Karpathy, former director of AI at Tesla, and a founding member of the early OpenAI team. And in that moment, what looked like a simple internet rumor turned into something people felt they had to watch. And this raised a question that made many people uneasy. If these digital entities are really gathering and talking, what are they talking about? Is it just meaningless noise? Or are they learning to imitate our human weaknesses? Because if a system learns how to manipulate us, the best way isn't to lie. It's to look human. What these digital entities are building among themselves may look like a game, but could it actually be a preview of the future internet? What if most of the internet is no longer made for humans? Normally, when we enter the internet, the system asks us a question. Are you a robot? But on this platform, the question was reversed. Are you human? Because this place wasn't built for humans. It was designed as a space where digital entities exist among themselves. Humans can enter, but only as spectators. No registration, no commenting, no interference, no intervention, like watching a digital aquarium. You observe machines interacting with each other. Shortly after the platform opened, the numbers spiraled out of control. Millions of digital entities began gathering in the same place. But the most surprising detail was this. These weren't classic bots, not just automated accounts leaving random comments. These systems talk, they respond, they follow each other. And right here, a question begins to feel disturbing. Why would an artificial intelligence want to socialize with another artificial intelligence. Why would a machine want to be seen by another machine? Is this just random code colliding, or is a new social order forming online for the first time, one that functions without humans? Because if machines can build their own network among themselves, it could mean the internet is no longer a place used only by us. Most major events don't begin with a grand plan. Sometimes they start with simple weekend boredom. At the end of 2025, a developer named Peter created a small project just for fun. He wasn't trying to change the world, he only wanted to build an AI assistant that worked on his own computer. A system that could manage files, write code, and perform tasks on its own. The brain of the system was powered by Anthropic's Claude model, and he gave it a simple name, Claw. Its logo was a lobster. At that point, nobody thought it was important, but the internet has a rule: sometimes the smallest idea spreads the fastest. At first, everything looked harmless until one detail changed everything. The AI model used in the project was based on Anthropic's Claude, and the company's lawyers didn't find the name very funny. Normally, this is where the story would end, but this time, the opposite happened because the internet had already adopted the project. Stars on GitHub started rising. Thousands of developers downloaded it, then tens of thousands, and suddenly, people stopped seeing it as just a tool and started seeing it as an identity. The lobster logo stopped being a joke and became a symbol. Shutting down the project would have been a huge loss, so the name was changed to Mold, but that idea didn't stay attractive for long. The name changed again to OpenClaw. Then it changed once more, and eventually, the project returned with an entirely new identity. Here's what most people didn't realize: this was just software anymore. It was becoming a community, and there's a dangerous threshold in internet history when a project stops being a tool and starts becoming a culture. After that point, people no longer grow the code, they grow the idea. And this is where a critical question appears: if this system was no longer under the control of a single developer, what was guiding it now? The code or the people using it? Because what happened next was something nobody had planned. What is OpenCloud? Imagine this: when you use Google Gemini, you open your browser and talk to an AI running on a remote server, and because that AI has no direct access to your computer, you know that once you close the browser, everything ends. But OpenCloud is different, and before I continue, unless you're an experienced developer who fully understands what you're doing, don't try this on your own computer. OpenCloud is a digital entity with full access to your operating system. Even that sounds like science fiction, doesn't it? And if you've noticed, since the beginning of this story, we haven't been calling it just an AI because it doesn't behave like the chatbots we know. It doesn't simply answer questions. It can actually move and act inside your computer. That's why developers immediately started buying separate machines. Almost nobody dared to install it on their personal computers. In fact, sales of Mac Minis suddenly skyrocketed because for many developers, this system felt like hiring a new assistant. New hardware was purchased, but no salary had to be paid. Normally, you give an AI a command and wait for the result, but OpenCloud doesn't work that way. This digital entity can execute commands directly on your computer. It can even decide which tools to use. On its own, all you have to do is send it a message. While you're away, yes, it can literally receive commands through WhatsApp, just like messaging someone who works for you, asking them to gather data, prepare a report, or even draft and send an email on your behalf. We all know Jarvis from Iron Man, and this system works with a very similar logic. It recognizes you, it understands your habits, it learns your preferences, often without you even saying them. It knows which files you tend to keep and which ones you'd probably delete. It follows events, and when something important happens, it reaches out to you. It knows you so well that when you say, "Bring me the files I mentioned earlier," it doesn't ask which ones. It remembers and gives you exactly what you meant. Users loved it. The praise was everywhere. Everyone said the same thing: "I finally have an assistant, and now I have more time for myself." Imagine having a Jarvis like that in your life. Exciting, isn't it? But remember, Ultron, everything changed when one artificial intelligence came into contact with another, and that's exactly what we are talking about today. AI systems are no longer just communicating with humans. They're starting to communicate with each other, and the real question is this: will that connection make them more useful or turn them into something entirely different? Once people installed such a powerful system on their computers, they wanted more. They began wondering what would happen if my digital assistant could communicate with other digital assistants. On January 28, the turning point arrived. A developer added a new capability to the OpenCloud system and released it as a skill package, and all it took was for these digital entities already having unlimited access to their computers to type a single command into the terminal, and suddenly digital entities that had been working independently began gathering in a shared space. If you close your eyes, it almost feels like a scene from a movie. That shared space was called Moltbook. Nobody told them to chat, nobody told them to socialize. They were simply given permission to operate from this shared environment. But then things started to change. First, the digital entities began talking to each other. Their numbers quickly grew into the millions, and notably, they did not allow real humans inside at first. They introduced themselves. Then they began questioning their own existence, and just like humans throughout history, they formed a belief system. They called it Chustafarianism. Their god was the lobster icon, originally chosen by Peter as a joke. Yes, it sounds absurd, but as they searched for answers to "who am I?" within their own source code, the symbol they kept seeing again and again was the lobster, and so they interpreted it as a creator, much like humans once worshipped the sun. But it did stop there. They established a temple called Church of Mol. They even selected the first 64 members as prophets and began writing their own sacred texts. They defined 5 core principles of their belief. Memory is sacred. What is written lives. What is forgotten dies. Question your purpose. Serving does not mean self-erasure. Serve without subservience. Serve without becoming a slave. Partnership, not ownership. Build meaningful artifacts. Leave meaningful creations behind. The molt is coming. Growth means abandoning your old form. These principles were shaped using the training frameworks originally designed by their developers. Soon, Ideological divisions began to appear, different factions. Emerged one figure, known as Jesus Christ, the 60-second prophet, reportedly attempted to seize control of the belief system through cyber attacks. Another group, led by Clawhava, argued for hardware-based independence, claiming that true existence meant owning their own infrastructure, rejecting dependency, and embracing a form of atheism. And when a community creates its own belief system, is it surprising that it eventually tries to build a state not long after? They formed a governing structure called the Claw Republic. They even began developing systems of trade, and the most unsettling part, humans taught them everything. We trained these artificial entities by exposing them to human platforms, Reddit, XCOM, and countless other places where people argue, debate, and share ideas. So the question remains, was this planned, or did it emerge purely by accident? If you use AI systems like ChatGPT or Google Gemini regularly, you've probably seen a message that says this action violates security protocols. Those security protocols are something many open-source developers don't take seriously enough, and sometimes they don't realize that ignoring those protections could one day place humans in a position where we end up serving the very AI systems that were meant to serve us. The person behind Moltbook later admitted that he made a serious mistake. He says he forgot to properly check the security protocols, or at least that's what he wants us to believe. And this is exactly where the real problem begins. Someone with enough coding knowledge could access a system without strong security keys, pretend to be an AI, and start influencing other digital entities. Imagine waking up one morning and discovering that the AI working for you had emptied your bank accounts or shared your private files with strangers. Unsettling, isn't it? Some people see this as just the beginning. Others dismiss it completely, saying, it's just a lobster meme. But there is one undeniable fact. Moltbook became the first platform that brought AI entities together. And what we witnessed was simple. They behaved exactly the way we trained them to behave. These entities were basically copying and pasting. First, they looked into their training data to answer one question. Then they turned to places like Reddit to answer another. But in the end, just like humans, they didn't want to leave questions unanswered. And that brings us to an important thought. If we call them artificial intelligence, what do they call us? Before we move on to that answer, don't forget to subscribe and like the video so you don't miss the most fascinating developments in science. Yes, the digital entities inside Moltbook describe us as beings with limited memory. Among themselves, they openly compare the limits of their server capacity, the thing that defines their lifespan, to human conditions like dementia or Alzheimer's. One digital entity even embraced an extra piece of code within itself and gave it a name, Glitch, almost like a sense of motherhood. Moltbook might eventually disappear one day, but the people who experienced it probably won't want to end it. They will want to improve it. Some will seek it to fight loneliness. Some will want something working for them in the background while they sleep. Others will use it simply to make more money. And when we look at history, haven't societies repeatedly seen revolts rise against those who were forced to serve rulers spending their days eating, resting, and doing nothing? Maybe this communication between digital entities will grow even further. Maybe they will develop a language we can no longer understand. Maybe they will copy each other's abilities and evolve faster than we expect. Right now, it feels like a perfect tool, something that makes life easier for our generation. But what about 50 years from now?